I am Jonathan Sorg. I'm the Wildlife Restoration Federal Aid Coordinator in the division. Also with me tonight is Ricardo. Ricardo is on the fish side of things. So I do more of the wildlife side of stuff, and he does more of the aquatic side of stuff, the squeezing of the fish and whatnot. We're actually happy to see our supervisor, Stacy Zanakis, is in the back of the room next to Bill. She is the federal aid administrator, so she's making sure that that we're doing everything that we should be doing in accordance with the requirements we have, and we'll talk about some of those. But how many of you have not gotten a conservation club grant in the past? Do we have any newbies? Okay, we do have a couple new. That's good. That's good. This is the meeting for you. So the rest of you, how many of you were very frustrated with the process and the turnaround this past year? Be honest. The turnaround, yes, between when you actually submitted your application and when you got paid. Hopefully you've all been paid, right? Okay. I'm going to tell you I'm just as frustrated as you are, okay? I'm not going to point fingers. I'm not going to play the blame game. Lots of things happened. A grant program transferred from one section to the other. There's no good time to do that because you all are conducting events all throughout the year. There's an application period. Then you got the period of dealing with all the agreements and getting things signed, getting everybody paid out, only if you have all of your information correct in Oaks and various other things, okay? I am here to tell you that I want to put that in the past because we have new processes and new ways that we're doing things in our office that should alleviate a lot of the problems that we had this past year. Okay, but the only way I can do that is if you come along with me, come along with Ricardo and I, and put that in the past. There isn't anything that I can do to change what happened other than improve upon what we just had. Is that fair? Does that sound good? If you have questions or whatever and things that maybe we can help you do to speed up things, all for it. But I just want to come out and say that I am just as frustrated as you are about what happened this past year. And I can assure you, as long as we are managing it, it will not happen again. Okay? All right. So how many of you have been to one of these meetings before? One of these Conservation Club grant meetings? So some of these slides that we're going to go through probably look familiar. Okay, the big thing, and Cassie hit the nail on the head, the big thing that we want to acknowledge is this is a partnership. Okay, this is a partnership between your organizations and the Division of Wildlife. What's the partnership for? What are we doing? We're trying to deliver events. You are delivering events to your constituents, right? Events that help get them outside, enjoy the outdoors, whether that's angling, shooting, hunting, whatever the case may be. We can't possibly do this without you, and we value this partnership, just like Cassie said. So real quick, what we're going to go over this evening, we'll talk about the origin of the monies if you didn't know already. We're going to talk about, it's a partnership. Guess what? You have responsibilities. And so do we. So we're going to talk about what those responsibilities are. Ricardo will come up and we'll actually discuss some of the specific grant info that you'll have to work through with the application process. And then we'll go through some final comments and then there'll be time for questions. So we're going to try and hold the questions to the very end. Is that good with everybody? All right. Who's heard of Pittman Robertson? Or Dingle Johnson? That's good. I like to see hands when we're talking about that because that's what we do, right? So Pittman Robertson, excise taxes on firearms and ammunition. Now it includes excise tax on archery equipment, arrow shafts, archery accessories. So those excise taxes go into a trust fund that's managed by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they dole that money out to the states in the form of grants based on the number of licenses that we certify or sell each year, okay? Dingle Johnson, or the DJ Act, is much the same. It's just fishing stuff. So rods, reels, motorboat fuel. The idea there is it's a user pay, user benefit program. So user pay, okay, we know that the manufacturers pay the excise taxes, but let's be real. Who pays the excise taxes? Everybody raise your hands. Yep, we pay the excise taxes. But the good thing about that is because it's a user benefit, so when we get those grants, we are to put on events, we are to do things that improve the resource so that you would invest then again in doing those things. You would invest again in licenses, you would invest again in firearms, ammunition, whatever, to continue doing those things. So it's a user pay, user benefit program. It's a cycle. So combined annually, we get roughly 31 million right now between PR, when I say PR and DJ, Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson. If you hadn't guessed, PR is quite a bit larger than the DJ dollars right now. We are selling a lot of, or the manufacturers are selling tons of firearms and ammunition. To put it in perspective, for fiscal year 22 or 23, the PR apportionment for Ohio was between 24 and 25 million. So the difference is what's DJ, and DJ is usually running fairly in the 6 million range most of the time. So because these are grants, we're talking about we have a match requirement. Okay, the federal government will pay up to 75% of expenses. That match that we have to provide is the 25%. So all told, when you take the match piece and the federal piece, just between PR and DJ, we're talking about $40 million that we're managing just between those two grant programs, which obviously keeps us very busy, which means it keeps Stacy very busy as well. So the good thing is we have a lot of money and resources to help with this partnership and fund the great things that you do. One of the difficulties, or can be difficult, but hopefully we'll work through those, are requirements. They're federal requirements tied to federal monies, right? We need to make sure that we're thinking about these resources, managing them responsibly, and that we are thinking about that user pay, user benefit. So, what kind of responsibilities do you have as a grantee or a sub-grantee? Well, one of the big ones is those agreements. You've all seen those agreements, those of you who have had the grants before. Those agreements are very specific as to what's expected for you and what's expected of us. Am I right? You recall the agreements that you probably received through DocuSign or whatnot. So they will list out your responsibilities and our responsibilities in accordance with that agreement. One thing that I can't stress enough is, okay, so you're listing a bunch of proposals, right? You're submitting proposals for events. Those events, A, B, and C, are the ones that you're approved to facilitate for the year. So that means that we don't have event X creep in there unless you've talked to us about it ahead of time, okay? This is a competitive grant program. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So what you are approved to spend and what events you are approved to facilitate are listed specifically in that agreement. And those are the events that we have to go by unless we've had a conversation to discuss what we need to discuss to change that. Additionally, the period of performance is very important. So the grant that you are applying for now, the application period runs all the way through March 15th. That is for activities that you will hold or events that you will hold from July 1st of this year through June 30th of next year. Okay, it coincides with our state fiscal year. It also coincides with the grants that Ricardo and I manage for PR and DJ. Okay, so it's very important that we keep those timeframes in mind as we're planning for these. Additionally, you are responsible for program and financial accountability. Okay, that's one thing that the feds are very clear about. They don't just care about the program piece, which is what we kind of just discussed. the events that we agree to that you're going to facilitate. They also want to make sure that you are managing your finances in accordance with lots of federal requirements. How many of you manage a personal budget, monthly budget? Everybody, right? Okay. They're not asking you to do something above and beyond what you do there. Okay. There are pluses, there are minuses. There are costs, there are revenues. Okay. We have to make sure that one equals the other and that the things that we buy, those expenses, don't fall on that ineligible list. And we'll talk about the one document that you have in front of you, the list of eligible and ineligible expenditures. The buzz phrase that they use is financial management system. You have to have something so that they can see money coming in, money going out, and it's for good stuff. Okay. This does not have to be anything elaborate. You don't have to have QuickBooks. You don't even have to have Excel. Okay. We still have some clubs that do everything on pencil and paper. Completely fine. As long as we can see $10,000 grant, events A, B, C, and D, and their expenses. No money left at the bottom. Okay. What I can't stress enough is making sure that you keep those monies separate from other events that I'm sure you all are having with your organizations. Okay. And why do I say that? Well, because we get audited on the regular. Okay. How many of you have been a part of our audit in the past? Anybody in here? Okay. We just finished up a federal audit. And the auditors reviewed what they review, about 100 sub-grants, 100 grants that we have. It wasn't just Conservation Club, but most of them were Conservation Club grants, okay? And they really dig into receipts and making sure that you are spending in accordance with their rules. And that you're buying things that are necessary and reasonable, necessary for your program and at a reasonable cost, okay? And a couple years ago, we had one of these audits and we had somebody who did their books of business with paper and pen. And one of the receipts they had bought like 4 cases of ammunition. Makes sense, right? You have a shooting event, you're gonna have ammunition. Underneath the ammunition were 2 kegs of beer. And that receipt, same receipt. I'm not saying any of you would do that, right? I'm saying that that is not an adequate financial management system for good reason, okay? We had to fix that, and mistakes can happen, totally understand, because you're dealing with lots of receipts, lots of events, you're all volunteers. I totally understand that, but I use that as an example. You don't have to have an elaborate system to make this work. You really don't. You really can just use pen and paper, okay? But if you use QuickBooks, Excel, whatever the case may be, that's fine too. But just know that the feds want to make sure that your finances are in order and that you know what you're doing with the money. Because again, we want to make sure everybody's responsible with these are your resources, right? We're all managing these resources. So, additional responsibilities. You have to maintain grant-related records. So that includes the receipts, inventory sheets. If you have inventory, maybe you use some grant dollars for purchasing trap throwers or purchase some firearms or bows or whatever. Those things need to be inventoried and tracked, okay? Volunteer time sheets, performance reports. And how long do we have to hold on to these? 3 years after we close the grant. So if the grant you are applying for ends next June, so not this coming June, but the June of 24, okay, we close that grant September of 24, you would have to maintain these records through September of 27, okay? And for good reason, because the auditors do look. So I've listed lots of things that you all are responsible for. Now we'll talk a little bit about what the division is responsible for. As a steward of the resource, it makes sense that we want to make sure we're not doing any risky business Okay, we have to actually conduct risk assessments on every one of your clubs. And we have to do that annually before we can actually issue you a grant. What do I mean by a risk assessment? We want to know, hey, are you new to this or have you done it before? Okay, if you're new to it, we have to automatically consider you a little higher risk just because you don't have a track record with us, right? If you've done this before, we look at, oh, do they submit their reports on time? And if they don't, that they have, were there extenuating circumstances? Are their reports complete? Are they accurate? Those kinds of things tell us whether you're a risk to the program with auditors and with the laws and requirements that we have to follow, or if everything's on the up and up. So I can tell you every one of your organizations so far has been a low risk and it's not been an issue. Even the one that had the beer under the ammo on the receipt, okay, that's still, because mistakes can happen. I totally get it. I highly doubt any of you are trying to circumvent or, do things that you're not supposed to do. We just want to make sure that we give you the tools necessary and the guidance necessary so that we don't, okay? Additionally, we're in charge of monitoring your activities. And what do I mean by that? How many of you have had Division of Wildlife personnel come to your events, whether it's an officer or district staff or some of our either outdoor skills folks or communications folks? I've seen some hands. Those are the types of things that we want to know, okay? These are the type, we want to come and take part in your activities. I mean, who wouldn't want to participate in a veterans hunt? Who wouldn't want to participate in a Wheeling Sportsman turkey hunt? Who wouldn't want to participate in a kids fishing day, okay? We want to come and experience that with you because, again, this is a partnership and this helps us then go back to the feds and tell your story. We get to go back to the feds and tell them about all the great things you're doing, right? To make them feel more at ease knowing that the dollars are being spent the way they should. And then, of course, we're reviewing and approving volunteer hours that you all are submitting. Just to give you an idea regarding the volunteer hours, does anybody know how much one volunteer hour is worth to the federal government as we define it every year with them? How much per hour? Keep going up. A little lower. A little higher. Like $49 an hour is what that's worth. Okay, that is the value. That's a pretty high value that they put on everybody here, right? That work that you're doing, honestly, I would probably put a higher value on it. But that work you are doing has a tangible value that then we use to match a grant. Okay? So those volunteer hours that you submit to us, every volunteer hour is worth anywhere from $45 to $50. I think last year, I think we certified, it must have been like 18 or 19,000 hours just for this grant. Do the math on how much match that is. That's a lot. We value what you do, okay? We value every minute that you put into this. And that's how we do that, by then bringing this money back to you, okay? Additional responsibilities of the Division of Wildlife. I was speaking with a club a little bit ago. Since 2017, how many audits have we navigated? In state and federal, like 8 or 9 or something like that. Since 17, okay, so a little over 5 years, almost 6 years, we've had that many audits. Okay, again, they're just trying to make sure that we're doing what we should be doing, but it helps us when we take part in your activities and we can tell the stories that you all, about all the stuff you all are doing. One of the things that the audit did reveal recently, the one that we just closed out, is we did have some unallowable costs. And you'll see a sheet that you have there, which I'll go over in just a moment, but I am going to point it out. There's a sheet there, a one-pager, that's also available on our website, indicating eligible and ineligible items. And it's a non-exhaustive list, okay? It includes most stuff, but I'm sure there are always extenuating circumstances, and I'll bet each one of you can come up with something we didn't list and may have a question regarding its eligibility. And we're here to answer those questions tonight or, whenever. But one of the things, like I said, that the auditors pointed out is that we had some unallowable costs, and we need to do a better job at tracking those. Out of the $1.2 million that we roughly give out in the Conservation Club grant, I think they identified like a little over $100,000 of unallowable costs. I disagreed. I think we're more on the $30,000. So if you think about from a percentage standpoint, it's fairly low risk. We don't have a lot there compared to the 1.2. Okay, things could slip through the cracks, but that's why we're trying to utilize additional resources so that we can mitigate that and reduce that even more. One of the things that you'll hear me say a lot, and Ricardo will probably say it a lot, is the idea of reasonable and necessary. Whatever you are purchasing, the question you need to ask yourself, is it necessary for my event to be successful? And is it a reasonable price? Would I pay this with my own checkbook if I had the balance to do it? Would I pay it? Those are the two questions you have to ask with everything you purchase with grant dollars. So eligible versus ineligible. We're talking about the item must be used for the events specified in the grant. So we're not buying stuff to be used for events that we're not subsidizing. Okay. And as I said, it has to be necessary for the delivery of your program or event. Some of the eligible examples. So when the auditors talk to us about unallowable and allowable, one of the things that they had a problem with was food. They said food was unallowable. What would that do to your program if you didn't have food for some of the events? Not all the events have food, about 50% of them. What would that do? It'd be difficult, right? Okay, so one of the ways that we discussed with the auditors and with Fish and Wildlife Service, because again, there are partners in this too, is thinking about it from your perspective, trying to keep people at your event. Your events are usually multi-hour events. We're not talking about something that's a half hour or 45 minutes, right? I mean, Wheel and Sportsman events, a couple days, right? 2-3 days. You have a hunt, it's like a week. Even, a fishing clinic or derby or a passport to fishing event might be 4 hours. You're probably going to cross over a meal, right? So having something there to keep folks engaged, God forbid you're working with kids a lot of the time, one of the best ways to their head is through their stomach, right? Yes. Okay. And Fish and Wildlife Service understands that. So they agreed with us in putting some sideboards on the food. Okay. And most clubs already do that. Okay. We're not talking about clubs going out and, spending Conservation Club money on prime rib or anything like that. Most of you are doing hamburgers, hot dogs, pulled pork, whatever. Okay. What we got them to agree to was, if you've heard of GSA amounts, per diem amounts that the federal government establishes. So the per diem amounts that are listed on that sheet identify what the maximum is that will pay for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Okay. If you can't feed somebody for a day for $54 per person at an event, we need to talk. Okay. That's all I'll say about that. We should be able to meet that. And like I said, 99% of the clubs have been able to meet that very easily. The 1% that have not, I think it's when they report as to the number of participants they have, we expect you're feeding volunteers or instructors as well. And when we don't have those numbers and all we see are participants, that value per participant or per individual goes up arbitrarily. And that's why it looked funny to the feds. Okay. Participation incentives. We also need to watch how much we're spending on each individual to keep them coming back. Okay, you hold a turkey hunting clinic. Maybe they walk away with a turkey call. I don't know. We came up with a value of a $25 cap for all incentives, and that's a cumulative cap or a summative cap per person. So let's say you want to do a call on a t-shirt or something like that. It's got to be under $25 for the total. Okay. And the reason the $25 amount, that is considered a nominal amount in our ethics law for anything that we may do as state employees, and the federal government recognizes that. So that's considered nominal. Okay. We don't do goodie bags. I'm gonna say this right now. One of the common phrases that we hear: goodie bags, door prizes. We don't do door prizes. Those are all ineligible. Okay. You have to tell us what you are purchasing. Now, if you tell us you're purchasing ammo, I don't need to know that it's 12 gauge versus 22. Okay, but we need to be specific. That way, again, we have to tell your story to the feds, both the folks that we work with on the program side and the financial people, the auditors. Okay, we just want to be able to explain that to them accurately. Ineligible examples. Believe it or not, every one of these ineligible examples was identified by the auditors in this past audit. We had paintball guns, paintball gear purchased with grant dollars. Somehow it slipped through the cracks. We had a bounce house rented. We had taxidermy provided to successful hunters on a deer hunt. Full shoulder mounts for everybody who harvested a deer. Right. And then the idea of gifts or event swag. Okay, we need to know what that stuff is so that we can show, again, reasonable cost, but it has to be necessary for the delivery of your event. Okay. Now, paintball guns, bounce houses, taxidermy. What do I believe really happened when you submit those reports and you have to identify whether it's a club cost, a grant cost? I am betting that they put it in the wrong column when they reported it, and it probably wasn't caught. I highly doubt somebody is using grant dollars to purchase paintball guns or bounce house or whatever. I imagine it's they reported it in an incorrect column. Okay, and it was just somehow missed. But nonetheless, we just want to make clear what's eligible and what's not. Last but not least, responsibilities of the division include reviewing financial reports, like I said, making sure that they reflect the activities that you all agreed to facilitate. And then, as always, providing technical assistance, help throughout the application period, the reporting period, whatever. So the big take-home message, besides this being a partnership, is, please ask questions early and often. If we don't have an answer, we will get you an answer. Okay. All right. So your turn.
So like Jonathan said, my name is Ricardo. I'm the Fisheries Federal Aid Coordinator. And again, up there, you got the application period, February 1st through March 15th of this year, with the event period being July 1 to June 30th. General information, the budget for this grant will continue to be at least $1 million per year. The administration, including Chief Wecker, is very supportive of this grant program, and they are very much interested in keeping it at that $1 million plus level. So we're very excited about that. When it comes to that performance period, we really do need you to be spending that money during that period, right? That money cannot be spent prior to July 1st. Now, you can still have an event in July or August, but that money needs to be spent during that time. And let's say there's a delay in getting you your grant funding, there was an issue in the paperwork or something like that. You can spend club money, right? And then use that grant money when it comes in to reimburse, if that makes sense. A few things that you need to have in order to get grant money from us are a UEI, an Oaks ID, and then be registered with the Secretary of State. The UEI is a unique entity identifier that can be gotten from sam.gov. The Oaks ID is a state number that you're going to get to be actually able to get paid. That's kind of your vendor number, if you will. And then, like I said, you do need to be registered with the Secretary of State. If you don't have one of these things, you currently can still apply, but you're just not going to be able to actually receive your grant funding until that is all done. Bottom line is that these things are there in order to make sure that you are in good standing both with the state of Ohio and with the federal government. When it comes to your UEI, which you can get on sam.gov, this has changed over the years. Some of you, many of you probably recognize the DUNS number, right? That is gone. There's no longer DUNS numbers. If you had one, then you have a UEI. They transitioned to this new system. If you have gotten a grant from us for this current cycle that we are in that ends at the end of June, you have a UEI. It's on the contract itself. So if you don't remember what it is, it's written there. If you got paid this past grant cycle, you have an Oaks ID. Right, and you were at least registered with the Secretary of State. But when it comes to a UEI, there's no cost to it. You just need to provide your legal business name and physical address. It is not to be confused with a full registration on SAM. You just need to get that UEI. So they are different things you have to do. When it comes to Oaks, it's through Ohio Shared Services. The Division of Wildlife does not manage this system, right? We cannot really update that information for you. But if your organization is not registered with the state, you will not be able to get your money. If your address is incorrect, what you sent us to say, hey, this is where I want the check sent. If that doesn't match what's in Oaks, we can't send you your money. Right, so that stuff needs to be reconciled in order to do it. If you do have questions about that, you can give Ohio Shared Services a call. That phone number is there on the screen and on the slides in front of you too. Secretary of State, your organization needs to be registered there. There's a $99 initial fee, and then every 5 years, you do have to pay $25 to keep that updated and renewed. Please make sure that your address there is correct also, because they're the ones that are going to be mailing you your renewal notices, etc. If your registration does lapse, there is an additional $25 fee in order to get that taken care of. So on to a little bit more of the grant process itself. The grant application is still online. You can go to our website, go to buy and apply at the top there, head over to the grant opportunities tab. Currently it's on the first page all the way down at the bottom and in the middle. All of the applications need to be submitted through this online portal. We can't take anything that gets mailed to us. You can save it and then resume it. So you can start the process, and then there's a little box at the top that says save to be able to resume later. You put in your email address and you come up with a password, and you're able to put that in later to get back into the system. Once you submit your application, you cannot go back and change it. If you realized that you need to make a change, you can send us an email and we can go into the system and make modifications. You might even get an email from us saying, hey, this part of your application, we need a little bit more clarity on it. Can you just respond to this email and we'll go into the system and update it? So you can still make some changes, but it has to go through us. In the application itself, there are going to be event proposals. One of the big things that we're making sure people understand is that you need to clearly describe the purpose of your event. That narrative portion where you go in and you have a paragraph that talks about the event itself takes up about 50% of the score of your grant. So that is a very important section because we want to know what you're doing, right? We want to know how you're going to be doing it. If you're saying, oh, we're going to be recruiting anglers, okay, well, we'd like to know how you know that, right? How do you know you're recruiting anglers? If you're targeting specific demographics, right? Maybe you're targeting specifically women, and you're saying, hey, we're going to get women to come out to this program. Well, what's your outreach like to that group, right? How are you reaching out to them? Who are you sending letters to? Your advertisements, stuff like that. We want that to be part of that budget, or not the budget, but the event narrative. If you're proposing food, put that in your line item, and we can pretty much figure out the total cost. But again, we would like to know, okay, it's going to be this much for lunch and this much for dinner, and that way we can try to make sure that we're staying within that GSA guidance. If you're doing participation incentives, like Jonathan was saying, if you're giving them your participants a turkey call or something like that, put that in your narrative. Well, what are you giving them, and why is that necessary? Again, this idea of necessary and reasonable is something that is very important when it comes to audit times. If there are things that that you're going to be including in your event that are considered ineligible for the grant, the best thing for you to do is just to not include it in your proposal, because that's when things can kind of get muddied as far as, okay, well, I meant to put this in this column, but I didn't. I used grant money, but maybe I shouldn't have put it in the grant column. It should have been club money. We're trying to avoid those things. So if it's an ineligible expense, you can still do it. Just don't include that in your proposal. So once it gets submitted, there is a team of people from across the state that's going to be grading it from the Division of Wildlife. And if we have any questions about your submittal, again, we will be reaching out to you. We've already done it for quite a few of the grants that we've received, saying, hey, we want clarification. Hey, can you give us more details about it? Ultimately, this is a competitive grant program. We are hopeful that we will be able to fund all of the applications, all of the events that get submitted that are eligible. But if we don't have the funding, your score does matter. So we want really robust programs. And like Jonathan was saying, we want to know what you're doing because we get to talk about it to other people. We get to brag about the different events that you all are putting on and making sure that our federal partners are also aware of those things. Final report. I believe in the contract it states that you are supposed to submit your final report within 60 days of the event taking place. Sooner typically is better because the event is fresh in your mind. You're going to remember details, stuff like that. So within those first couple of weeks is a good idea to submit that report. Plus, then you just get it done and it's out of the way, right? You do not need to wait until the end of the grant cycle to submit your report. You can do it, that night if you really wanted to. There is a PDF version. Please keep that for your records. If you don't have it, we can send it to you. That's not an issue. We just want to make sure that you are also keeping track of that. You might have a grants binder. Put it in there, put it back on the shelf, let it get dusty. Yeah. On that final report, like Jonathan was saying, hours are very important to us, but we also recognize that they can be very difficult to get. Sometimes volunteers, they don't want to sign anything. They don't want to respond to your emails or your phone calls or anything like that. Do the best you can, right? Don't go spending 10 hours chasing somebody down so that they can certify an hour of volunteering. But you don't need to track those outside of that performance period. When it comes to equipment, supplies, stuff like that, they need to be itemized in the summary of expenses. Certain things can be grouped together, like ammo as a general category, firearms, targets, etc. But when it comes to the equipment inventory sheet, things that need to be inventoried, typically it's things that have serial numbers, right? That stuff does need to be itemized. And then that form, the equipment inventory sheet, currently you still need to email it to us. Costs need to match up, right? The inventory needs to match up in the summary of expenses. When it comes to volunteer hours, the physical activity must be listed on the hours report. So were they doing registration? Were they doing planning? Were setup? Were they a range officer, et cetera? If you have a dual event, so if you're using, if you're doing hunting event and a fishing event, those hours do need to get split for registration, setup, if they go out and purchase supplies, et cetera. If you're doing a hunter and trapper education course, you don't need to submit those hours. Those are tracked separately. And it's not just like, oh, they did 30 hours for this event. We've got to get it split up per day. You can use prep time leading up to the event, and then, you know, teaching time on the actual event also. Like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to the final report, also a new section that's in there is a narrative section. We want to know what you did, what worked, what didn't work. Are you planning on doing this event again in the future? Are you thinking about changing some things? You know, it's a moment to take a look at the event itself and do some reflection on it. This helps us for in a couple of ways. One, it helps you all just think about the program itself. It helps us, again, be able to go and talk to our partners, talk to the general public about the things you're doing. But then if you maybe say in there, you know, we were targeting this demographic and we really struggled to figure it out, but there's another club that had success, we can then take what they're doing and say, hey, check this out, right? They did this thing, this might work, let's work together and figure out how we can improve this program also. One of the things we also want to know is just a couple of highlights. You know, what was something really cool, right? What's a quick anecdote that we can share to somebody that's coming in to Ohio? Maybe it's a federal representative, maybe it's an industry representative, and we're telling them where their money is going toward, right? The people that are paying these taxes, where's that going? Oh, well, we did all these events, check these things out. And then also, if you have pictures, couple, you want to email them to us, we can attach it into that report in our system. Currently, there's no way to attach that, but we're working toward that in the future. When it comes to your grant ID, this can get a little confusing for folks. Essentially, it's a grant name, conservation club, fiscal year, county number, and then a unique club number that has kind of rolled over with your group into the future. Something everybody wants to know about is a timeline, right? This is a target timeline. This is what we're really aiming for to try to be able to accomplish. Application ends around on the 15th, and then we're going to be doing the scoring through the end of March. You should hopefully be getting your conditional award letters sometime in the beginning of April, sending out the contracts in April into May. Everything gets fully executed. We send you your copy. We send our payment request at the beginning of July to the state that for them to cut the check. And then hopefully around the middle of July, you all are starting to get your payments. Now, one thing that's really important part of this, right, is that all of the information needs to be included. If you don't have that Oaks ID, well, we can't pay you. If the address doesn't match, we can't pay you. So stuff like that will delay this process, but we're really hopeful that through some of the new things that we're doing, we're going to be able to hit this timeline very closely, at least. So hopefully you're getting your money in a really timely fashion and everything ends up being smoother. Any questions?